Welcome back to Build Season, your new favorite channel. Hopefully, I'm your new favorite host. I'm Steve. This is my 69 F100 I bought from Kevin at Junkyard Digs. I want to see if I can turbocharge the engine in this truck as cheaply as possible to make this thing way more fun and way more drivable. All right, just to give you guys a brief overview of the truck, here it is. If you guys watched the last episode, you probably got a good look at this thing already. Under the hood is your standing cruising model 360, nothing fancy. I don't even know what the compression ratio is on this engine. It's probably something awful, like 8.5 to 1. Before we get to wrenching, I'd like to apply a little bit of math and science. Remember, math, science, then horsepower. I downloaded a free app on my phone to hopefully capture the 0 to 60 time of this truck. We're gonna head out right now, we're gonna capture that, measure it as fairly as we possibly can, then we're gonna turbocharge this thing, and then we're gonna run the test at the end to see how much faster the truck is. If any of you watched the last video, you'll know that this darn tailgate right here really loves to come falling open. Right to life. Man, is this thing awesome. Oh. No choke. It's not even burning any oil anymore. We have now reached our undisclosed location, and we're about ready to start testing. Something I forgot though. If we want all-out horsepower, if we want the best time, we gotta close these wing windows. Funny thing about 0 to 60 testing this truck is that no one is going to notice. You can stand on this thing and be hauling butt as hard as possible, and no one's going to actually be able to tell the difference because it's so slow it just seems like you're driving normally. All right, here we are in drive. I'm just going to stand on it. Hey, look at that. .4 seconds, 0 to 60. Holy crap. All right, we'll do one more time just to back up that run and make sure that it's accurate. Attempt number 2. Hey, much better. I think that says 8.7 seconds. Look at that. 8.7 to 60 the second time. All right, we're gonna run one more time. Camera facing me this time. We're gonna see if we can take the average of all 3 runs. There you can see 9.6. Let's reset it. Okay, do one more just for good measure to make sure things didn't get messed up here. That one didn't even record. I guess that's what you get for using a free app. So I just did one more run off camera, and it looks like a 9.7 again. It kind of goes like, what? Oh, we have bikers. I should mention, if I sound a little bit weird, it's because I have really bad allergies and we're in the middle of what seems to be an allergy tornado. All right, so our 3 runs were 9.4, 9.6, and 9.7. I'm gonna throw out the 8.7 run because I think that was a fluke. It didn't feel 1 second faster. That's our 3 runs. We're gonna add that up and get the average, which will be up here. Kind of funny, this thing goes 0 to 60 about the speed of a pretty fast drag car. Hey, something cool happened.
The link on my main page for the parts fund, there's just a PayPal link there. Our first subscriber donated. Thank you, Dean. I really appreciate that. Dean is a local guy, also a YouTuber. He has a channel called The Sword Rules. So if you get some time, go check out his channel. He works on all kinds of cars. He's been into cars for a long time. Super nice guy, and I really appreciate the support.
In other news, the Fundred's power steering leak has gone from slightly noticeable to insistent. I heard you the first time. You don't have to keep repeating yourself, okay?
All right, I want to start off by saying that this video is not going to be a how-to turbo your truck. So if you don't like what I'm doing, well, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments.
Every turbo setup is different, but they all revolve around one thing, the turbo. Oh man, is that a butterfly? Aww. The turbo system in every car is a little bit different. These two, the Datsun and my Oldsmobile over here, these are both EFI cars. They have this one 8 injectors, over here 4 injectors. That's a high pressure fuel system, and the tuning is a little bit different. On the Fundred, we're gonna do a blow-through carburetor setup. So the components needed are gonna be a little bit different between this truck and say the Datsun or the Oldsmobile.
The reason I'm going blow-through is 1, I've never done it before, and 2, the packaging is really attractive. I don't mean the packaging is sexy. Maybe it is. What I mean by that is that you don't need an intercooler. So there's way less piping, there's way less fabrication, and you don't have to try to jam as much shit under the hood. Basically what we're gonna do is straight out of the turbo, right into the carb hat. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna have very little turbo lag because there's very little boost tubing to fill with boost.
So the first, most glaring and obvious problem that we have to fix is the fact that we need a manifold setup to pipe exhaust gas from both sides of this engine into a turbo. Now I did look online, and there is one company that makes turbo headers for an FE, and they are outrageously expensive, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,200.
So because I'm cheap, I'm gonna make my own turbo manifold. That's where we're gonna start.
Man, having a project truck is so freaking handy. All your parts storage is right here, and you have a workbench right here. If you're wondering if building your own turbo manifold is sketchy, this right here, the manifold on my Oldsmobile, I built this myself, and this car has made almost 600 wheel horsepower for the last 5 years. It's broken 2 transmissions, and it's run at the track multiple times and done road trips and stuff, and this homemade manifold has lasted me this long. So here's what I picked up to build this turbo manifold. I got these flanges from Speedway Motors. There's actually 2 of them here. Couldn't order just one, so I ordered a steel header flange for an FE. Right here I have 1.5" long radius Schedule 40 steel weld elbows. You can get these at any local pipe supply shop. I have 4 of those. Over here I have a 2-inch Schedule 40 45-degree bend, and here is a 2¼ V-band flange. And up at the front, this is a 2-inch Schedule 40 90, and then this is 2-inch Schedule 10 steel pipe. Ooh, fun. First bolts we get to deal with are the rustiest and worst bolts of any car. Manifold bolts. Even worse is going to be the downpipe bolts on these. Another potential issue, transmission dipstick might get in our way. Looks like it gets a little tight back there. I hope these bolts aren't too hard to take off, but it looks like Ford was kind enough to give us a factory oil leak. It's hopefully going to loosen those bolts for me. Ooh, all right. Shorty fit on there. Ooh, that was all triumphant in the last clip because that socket fit on there. What do you think the chances are that this is actually going to move? Oh my goodness, it did. I think. Oh my goodness, I think it's turning. Fantastic. Yeah, you know what they say, safety second. Oh man, my radio presets. Well, by the fuzz on my peaches, I can't believe it. We actually got these both out. Now, we still have 8 more to take the manifold off, but I know Kevin and Angus had it out at some point, so hopefully it comes out. This is actually hot. Just to get that back bolt out of the manifold there, I grabbed my 6-inch extension. All right, get this guy out of here. Come on now. There we are. Now these manifolds are like symmetrical, so you could flip it upside down. So you could actually flip this manifold forward and do like an up and forward kind of deal. Problem is, I'm doing a single turbo setup, so I need to be able to connect both sides of the exhaust
over on the passenger side. These being cast iron, I can't weld them. I don't have the right rods. I don't want to learn anyway. I'm seeing a little bit of a flaw in my plan. You put that, if you put that right over the port, there is definitely a little bit of what I like to call gap welding. I don't know if I told you guys, but I got certified. So the basics of how this fabrication process is going to go is I'm going to take the flange here, bolt it right to the cylinder head, and then I'm going to take all these elbows and I'm going to mess with them and turn them and whatever, make sure that I can get at all the spark plugs and it's not going to hit anything else. Then I'll bring the welder over here, tack them into place. So we'll start with that, and then once all of the elbows are sort of in place, I'll bring the main piece of pipe over here and we'll determine what's the best way, to cope all the pipes together. Okay, it's been a minute. Excuse how dirty my welding table is. So here is the beginnings of the turbo manifold for the FE. The next step, I have to cope all those pipes so that this main piece right here can drop right down on and be welded. My idea here is if you look straight down at this manifold, if we imagine this pipe has to come down like this. So I think what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to mark a line across the top of all of these and whack them off, and then lay the pipe on there and see what it does. Whack them off and lay pipe. All right, it's been a bit again. So as you can see, I'm now working on getting these coped. I'm kind of married to the placement now. So I'm going to work on giving these a fish mouth so that the pipe will sit right on top, just like that. After, I don't know, 45 minutes or so of roughly coping this thing in, there it is. Now I know that this is kind of rough. I think that's going to do just fine. There is one area right back here where I got a little happy with the grinder. So I'm going to take a sliver of one of the other cuts, slab that back in there and fill it in. So that is the beginning of the turbo manifold. So I'm going to bolt this to the head and see how it fits. There it is, sitting roughly in the copes. Still have 1.5 inches or so to the ender fender. There's plenty of room back there at the back for that 45 to kick down and follow the floor pan. I think that's about all I'm going to do for tonight. Seems like things are starting to fit pretty good, but the turbo is not going to be here till tomorrow, and I can't really finalize the placement of any of this stuff until I know how big that turbo is going to be. It's the next day, and it's the best day in every turbo build, and that is when the turbo shows up. So this here is a VS Racing, not sponsored. I wish I was. If you guys want to work with me, let me know. This is a VS Racing 7665. So it's actually a smaller exhaust housing, but a decent size cold side here. But what's beautiful about this one is the billet wheel. I went with VS Racing because this turbo right here is a billet wheel Gen 1 7875, and that has been on this Oldsmobile, making around 600-ish to the tire for about 4 years. It's been awesome. It's a super reliable journal bearing turbo, and I really liked the quality, so I figured I'd go with them again. Now the major difference between this turbo and the one on the Oldsmobile is the size of the exhaust housing. This is a 76 millimeter compressor wheel and a 65 millimeter turbine wheel. So what that is going to translate to is this thing should spool a lot faster, but have a big enough cold side to provide enough CFM so that the 100 can make all kinds of boost and power and be great. The idea here is that the 100's engine's not going to spin much more than 5,000 RPM. Now that I've got the turbo here, I can finally make some important decisions. I didn't want to finish welding that manifold up until I knew just how big this darn thing was going to be and where it was going to sit in the engine bay. All right, it's been a bit, but look at this. I think that that puts that turbo pretty much right where I want it. So we still have good clearance to the cylinder head, so we can take the valve cover off if we need to. If you look, here's our down pipe. It's going to shoot right straight back this way. I'm not sure if I'm going to trim the inner fender way down in here,
to maybe dump the downpipe, you know, behind the tire. And then if you look way back in there, you'll see there's the V-band clamp that's going to sneak right around, and it's going to miss the transmission dipstick and hook up with the crossover pipe from the passenger side.
Okay, now it's time for all the off-camera stuff. Grinding, cutting, welding, grinding, cutting, welding, blah, 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 over and over again. I won't go into that because I'm not really a fabricator. I do this for fun.
All right, there it is. That is the final mock-up of the FE single turbo manifold. It actually fits really nice. And this flange right here, this is from Speedway. This is a T4 to 2.5 inch CNC machined steel flange. Man, are these nice. It's kind of expensive, it's like 48 bucks, but holy shit, did that turn out clean as heck. Next thing I have to do is fluff all these copings just a little bit more, get these a little bit tighter fitment, and then take this center tube off and plasma cut out all the holes for the runners. Once that's done, I can put this all back together, weld everything solid, and then we are ready to go. For any of you that might be curious how I'm doing this at home, all I did was with those pieces of pipe there still connected to the centerpiece, I took a scribe and I went around each tube and made a mark. So now on this pipe, I have all of my openings traced all the way along. So I'm actually going to come back at this with my plasma cutter and cut out the majority of each one of these holes, and then I'll come in with either a die grinder or a burr or something to kind of smooth them out, and then this piece over here with the runners can just slap right back over top. I can weld all the seams up and we're done. And just like that, voila, bam. So all I'm going to do now is come in here with a carbide burr, clean these up, get rid of all the slag, because plasma cutting slag does not weld well. It'll be a porous weld, it'll get contaminated, and it'll work for shit. Don't do it. So I'll come in here, I probably gotta nip that guy, clean this up, and then this can all be tacked back on. Sort of nice. Voila! Everything is nice and clean and ground.
Welcome back, it's the next day. Continuing to weld on the turbo manifold for the Fundred.
Here's a better look at the progress. I welded all these seams in the main tube yesterday, and then welded all the runners this morning. I have not done up by the header pipes yet. I haven't welded the V-band yet. It's really good practice to take the opposite flange and put the clamp on here and clamp this down as tight as possible so that you minimize the chances of warping of this flange. Something else I forgot, whenever I do V-bands, I always just do, like with a MIG welder anyway, I just do a bunch of little tacks. Makes the weld look nice. I don't think it's the strongest, whatever, but it does, you know, kind of minimize the amount of heat you put into it.
The flange on these headers, these are 3/8 inch header flanges I got from Speedway. They're not the thickest, and so I am worried about them warping.
Here I have the original factory manifold bolted straight to the header flange on the turbo manifold. This is an attempt to try to keep this flange as flat as I possibly can while I'm welding the header tubes, or the tubes directly to the flange here. Now, there are better ways of doing this.
All right, before anybody says anything, I know this isn't the right way to do this. In fact, the right way to do it would be to pay for a $1,200 set of turbo headers that a real fabricator made. I'm gonna try this and see if it works, and if it doesn't, I have myself to blame.
All right, let it cool off with the help of the garden hose, and look at that. Now there might be, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch, 32nd of an inch or so worth of warping, but for the most part, the trick of bolting it to the old manifold worked really good. All right, manifold's on there, mounted up. What can you guys guess that I forgot or haven't put on the manifold just yet? That's right, the wastegate. I have to figure out where I'm gonna put that. Here's the wastegate that I went with. This is a 44 millimeter from VS Racing. Again, not sponsored by VS Racing, but I have one of these on my Oldsmobile and it's worked really, really well. And voila, wastegate plumbed in. It's actually gonna work out really nice. When it's in the truck, you'll be able to spin this, and then I'm gonna actually route the wastegate dump back into the downpipe. And speaking of the downpipe, so this downpipe flange on the turbo here is a very specific size. It's just a smidge bigger than a standard 3-inch downpipe. So I actually forgot to order this flange. I am gonna order it tonight, it'll be on the way. Pivoting just a little bit, I'm actually gonna work on the connection to the up pipe, if you will, going into the back of the turbo manifold. So here's the other half of the 2 1/4 V-band. That's going to go on there. Then here is a straight piece of 2 1/4 pipe, which should actually hook up really, really nice to the back of the manifold and come right down under the truck. Okay, it might look a little crazy, but we've got everything we need. So I'm just going to let these welds cool, but that is going to be the start of our up pipe underneath the truck. So I'm waiting on some more pipe, some other parts to show up. I think we're going to stop the fabrication portion of the program right now. The next thing that we need to solve is the oil getting to and from the turbo. So the turbo that I'm using right here is a journal bearing turbo or an oil cooled turbo. Basically all it has is a high pressure oil feed and a gravity oil drain. Right here, there's the small fitting, that's the oil feed. On the back side, that's the oil drain, the larger fitting. Conveniently, Ford gives us a nice port right there. That is the oil pressure sending unit, or the switch. It is on the block, or right on top of the oil filter adapter, right back in there. So that is going to be pretty easy to solve for oil pressure. We can back that out, put a T-fitting in there with a plug, and then we can run our existing oil pressure switch as well as the oil feed line to the turbo. All right, I'll say it right now. That is a good thing. Thank you, Ford. I will give you +1 for that. That's it. Now, for the oil drain, that is going to be a little bit more complicated. It really depends on where the turbo is sitting. In this case, our turbo is going to sit somewhere right in this area. We're not above the valve cover, and the reason for that is hood clearance. The next option, and what most people normally do, is they will tap a fitting into the side of the oil pan. The problem with that is, in order to get the oil pan off of this engine, I may have to lift it up off the mounts and or take it out. Another really common place to plumb in an oil return is in the timing cover. Above like the cam gear or whatever, you'll be above the oil level so the oil can drain back and then hit the pan. Right there, in between those hoses, we have a nice open spot where we can drill a hole and tap a fitting right in there. I have looked up these timing covers online, and it looks like if we throw the fitting in right there, as long as we don't go too deep with it, it's going to be nowhere near anything, and it should work just fine for this. Good evening, it's the next day. I just want to let you guys know that I would never drill into an engine that is in a car to do something like this without taking it apart. I would never use a drill bit into an engine, vacuum cleaner, to suck up the chips. Just gotta get this damn vacuum engaging in automotive negligence. I can't believe that somebody would ever try to put grease on a tap just to catch the threads instead of taking the part off. It just seems like laziness and oversight to me, you know? All right, it's been a little bit. If you look right down there, there is our oil return fitting for our turbo. Back out here today, we got the oil drain plumbed in last night. Gonna go after the oil feed on this truck, and it's actually pretty convenient. So as you can imagine, that thing, while it looks like it's easy to access, is actually pretty tough to get to. So we're gonna have to take the oil filter off. I'm gonna make a big mess, so I'll probably have to top this thing back off when we're done. This little project up in here was way more difficult than it needed to be, but everything seems to fit just fine, and the line just sneaks up there. It runs up behind the power steering pump. It loop-de-loops through the fuel line there. It is what it is, and I may have created a small fuel leak when I cracked that line. We will see when it starts up. Damn kids and their loud muscle cars. We've got the oil feed line down here, buried behind this power steering pump. That's sorted. It kind of routes right up next to the fuel line, sneaks under that little this little hose here for the water pump. Goes right under that, comes underneath the upper rad hose, and voila, here is our oil feed line. Turbo is going to sit somewhere right around here, so that should be pretty good. Look who decided to show up. Eric from S Motorsports. This is this LS 6-liter powered 3rd gen Camaro. It's okay. I mean, it sounds all right, I guess. Sounds okay.
Problems.
It's a 3rd gen. Number one problem is just the body style.
No, they're coming back.
So the drain line is ready, right down in there. Just a short little guy, and I'm used to that. Oh yeah, I forgot. So I've mocked up the charge piping here, and this accidentally worked out really nice. We're gonna come right under the upper rad hose here. We're gonna miss the fan by an inch or so, and come right straight up into the carburetor. So this is what the charge piping is gonna look like. It's as simple as it could possibly be. With the oil lines now done, I'm gonna jump back under the truck. I'm gonna finish the crossover pipe. So I'm trying to get the downward pipe off of this manifold hooked up, and man, the one good thing about trucks is you don't have to lift them up. But also the bad thing is that you can't frickin' reach anything. Man, working on my Datsun was tight, but at least I could get all the way to the engine bay from the ground. Okay, it's been a minute. Here is what the crossover pipe looks like. I know, it's crush bent. I didn't order enough bends, and I'm not happy about it either. That right there is a nice little stainless bellows from Amazon. And up there, that is the pipe that drops down from the back of the manifold. I think I'll disconnect it up there, and I'll disconnect it over here, and I can finish welding all of this on the bench. And then I think we can finally assemble the exhaust for the last time. Okay, it's been just a minute. Here's where I'm at. I have reached a new level of frustration with parcel shipping services. What the hell, man? I ordered something on Monday and I can't get it by Thursday, and the tracking hasn't been updated all week. I've got the crossover pipe finished, and now I am very loosely hooking up everything because I want to hear what this thing sounds like. I think that's going to help me relax. All right, so the turbo's just sitting on the manifold. There's 2 bolts that are holding it in right there. The other 2 aren't even put in. This oil line is hand tight. The drain line under there is hand tight on both sides. The the wastegate's not even hooked up yet. The manifold is held to the head with, you guessed it, 2 bolts. That's right. The heater hoses are just going to stay right there. And I am going to very quickly weld a 3-inch elbow to the V-band that definitely does not fit this turbo over there, just so that we can actually hear this thing run. I'm so excited. I'm tightening up a clamp on one of the biggest mistakes I've made in a while with the tiniest wrench I own. I will reiterate again, this is stupid. I am doing this out of frustration, but it should be entertaining. I forgot there is one thing I'm going to do as a precaution, and I'm going to remove the coil wire just so that we can crank the engine for a little bit and get oil pressure up into the turbo. That way it's not trying to spin with no oil in the bearings. Yeah, okay, nothing yet. Okay, you guys tell me if that starts leaking. Yeah, still nothing. It could take a little while for that to fill up. Oh yeah, there we go. We have oil flow. Excellent. I don't know if you can see. Here we go. Yep. Try this out. See how it sounds. Holy shit, dude, it runs. Now, I know we're a long way from driving. There's a ton of little details I have to finish up. I won't go into that, but it runs still, and the turbo is mounted and spinning and spooling. Yes, I'm so excited. We'll be back out here tomorrow. All right, it's Friday, and look,
Steve 2.0 is back. That is right. Reunite. Okay, I won't sing. That's terrible. We're gonna tag team a whole bunch of stuff. We need to work on the downpipe. Steve's gonna work on mocking that up. I'm gonna give him a couple pieces of pipe. That's gonna lead right into a bad joke. And then I'm gonna work on the fuel pump. I'll show you what we're gonna do for our boost reference fuel system. So what are you gonna do?
So we're just going to make a slit from about where this ridge is straight down, and then 3-inch over to fit the pipe down. It's just so we'll have a channel here, and then we can route that down pipe through there somewhere. Or depending on how this flaps in the breeze, that might just come off completely.
I promise I won't make a single joke about whether it's going to fit. All right, it's been a little bit. Under here, Steve went ahead and clearanced the inner fender there, so the downpipe can now come right through very nicely. Speaking of the downpipe, here it is over here, just mocked up for now. It's just tacked together. We did get the O2 sensor in there, and look at those welds. Now it isn't TIG, but that looks all right to me. Look at this, man. Does that billet wheel just look sexy as shit? Man, I love those things. Those that 11 blade or something from VS Racing, those are so nice. Look at this, downpipe is in and welded basically. The heater hoses, we have to deal with that yet. We do not have any leaks at our oil line, both feed or return. We still have a power steering leak, as this truck has always had. We will not fix that. We're gonna wait for the crown. We're gonna wait for the other stuff. What do you think, Steve? Enough is enough?
I think it's time to call it.
Actually, that clock is 10 minutes slow, so it's after 10 o'clock on a Friday night. I will pick back up tomorrow.
All right, back out here today. I've enlisted the help of, yes, you guessed it, Andrew is here. We are on a mission to try to get this truck on the road today, running on the turbo setup. So we're gonna divide and conquer, and I'm gonna try not to leave anything out.
Andrew, you're the guest today. What do you feel like doing?
I think we're going to start with the AFR gauge and then move on to find a good switch 12-volt source for our future distributor going in here.
Okay, under the truck, getting ready to pull the factory fuel pump out there, and of course some jackass genius put an oil line right there, but it actually doesn't affect taking this pump off at all. I got one bolt left, just a couple of threads on it, and then this whole thing will come out, and I will take you guys over to the bench and show you what we're going to do for our fuel system.
It's finally time where I'm going to explain what we're going to do for a fuel pump, and as is kind of in theme with this whole build, we're trying to do this cheap to see if we can get this done and have it be effective. So what we're going to do for the fuel pump is something a little bit different. Here is the factory Ford FE fuel pump. Here is a cheapy Speedway 80-gallon-per-hour fuel pump for the FE. It'll bolt right up, everything's the same, but in order to do boost, we need our fuel system to be boost referenced. So we need the pressure to increase along with the boost, so we maintain a pressure differential between the incoming fuel and the carburetor. We need at least 6 or 7 pounds of differential pressure for the fuel to continue to flow in the carb under boost. So one of the ways that you can do that that's pretty economical is to buy a fuel pump like this. And if you look right here, this is an open port. This is a vent port. So when the fuel pump strokes, you might hear that popping. This is where air is moving in and out of the chamber on the top side of the diaphragm. Some of you may already have jumped to the conclusion here, but what we're gonna do, which is true to form with the rest of this build, we are going to drill this hole out just a little bit, and then we are gonna thread it for an 1/8 inch NPT, and we are gonna put a boost fitting right here. What that's gonna do is as the turbo makes boost, it's gonna add extra pressure on top of this diaphragm, which is sealed from the fuel down here, so there's not gonna be any interference. It's also sealed from the crankcase. We're gonna add pressure on top of the diaphragm so that this pump will proportionately increase its fuel pressure output in relation to boost. So if we add 1 pound of pressure above the diaphragm, when the fuel pump strokes, it has to push against 1 extra pound of pressure, thus raising our fuel pressure 1 pound. So if we have 6 pounds of fuel pressure normally, if we add a pound of boost on top, it'll be 7 pounds. Add 2 pounds of boost, it'll be 8 pounds, etc. Now this method I've heard is not super effective when you go higher in boost. In this case, we don't even know if there's aftermarket pistons in this engine. We're looking at maybe 6 to 8 pounds maximum. So I think we're gonna try it with this fuel pump. If it doesn't work, we can always switch to an electric one later. All right, immediate failure. So this port right here was actually too small for an 1/8 inch NPT tap. So I actually tapped it with like a 5/16 18, I think, is what went in there. I'm gonna put RTV around that bolt, shove that in here to seal this off. Then I'm gonna come in a different spot here above the above the diaphragm to put our port in there, just because I thought I would crack this if I put the pipe tap in there because it's tapered. One thing we wanted to explain or show is that when you're wiring in an aftermarket distributor like we are, most, if not all, aftermarket distributors are going to require a clean 12 volts to power everything inside, because electronic ignition, if you don't have a clean 12 volts or something less, it might not fire correctly, or you could have all kinds of drivability and running problems. If you look right here, Andrew's got the power probe on the wire that ran to the coil from the old setup, and what is that showing? 6.9?
6.4.
6.4 volts.
That's pretty low.
There is a resistor wire that would drop the voltage so that the points would last longer. So we actually have to bypass that wire and run a new fresh switch 12 volt.
So to overcome that, what we're going to do is put a relay and use a clean switched 12 volts that we actually found up underneath the steering column to pull in our relay. And on the one side of that relay, we'll have a clean 12 volt source to the battery, and on the other side, the contacts will go to all of our accessories that require that clean 12 volt switched signal. All
right, so while Andrew's been over there doing productive things, I've been over here drilling a bunch of holes and smearing a bunch of RTV over all kinds of shit. And you might notice that fitting where I was gonna put a fitting in, I've now tapped and siliconed in a bolt to seal that off. And then I took this pump apart and drilled a hole in the top here. That is going to be our boost reference line right there on top of the pump. Here is the new fuel pump, all ready to go, installed. Fittings are back in here. I got the gasket on there with a slight layer of RTV on both sides. Andrew is almost done with the electronic portion of the program, and soon we are going to be looking at that brand new carburetor, and then I will explain the crown jewel, the distributor. I just wanted to take a short break and show you guys something very interesting. We made it all the way from Iowa like this, and this didn't give us any problems. We were about that far from losing our ignition system. If you look right there, oh my goodness, how did that make it? So it's probably a very good thing that we are upgrading this whole system to get rid of all this stuff anyway. Okay, look at this. It literally just broke off. I went to remove it or start to remove it and it's gone. Not very nice. This is a Proform 650 race carburetor. Has what I believe are annular boosters. It has no choke horn. It has billet metering blocks as well as a billet base plate. It has sight glasses for the front and rear floats, and it does have jet extensions, and I also believe it has poly floats. Anything blow through carburetor, you do need poly floats because brass floats will collapse under boost pressure. There is one like little check ball in this carburetor that I have to remove, and I will link the gentleman's video on YouTube that I watched. Maybe he'll provide a little bit better explanation, but I'm going to blow this thing apart and show you what that is. Right, so I've got the base plate removed off the carburetor, and if you look right here, this little brass ring behind that is a check ball. So what we need to do is just very gently with a tiny drill bit remove that brass retainer ring, and then the check ball will fall out, and then this thing should be basically ready to go for blow through. Fancy new carburetor going on. Look at that thing. It's purple. Right? Yeah, see? It's definitely hitting on all 8. Now comes the part of this video that I am super excited about. I needed a distributor and I needed some sort of method to adjust or retard timing and boost. Now the ways I've heard of people doing that are with an MSD box, but you also need an MSD distributor to do that. It's kind of expensive. So I saw Kevin's video, I saw Dalton's video, I'm sure you've seen both of those. I reached out to Progression Ignition and I got this bad boy right here. Comes very well packaged, nice. This is actually the second box. It came in a bigger box. All right. Now this right here, oh wow, it's a billet body and everything. Look at this thing, holy shit. This right here is a Progression Ignition Ford FE distributor with a black female terminal cap, so that I don't even have to change my spark plug wires. The genius part about these distributors is this right here. That is the built-in map sensor. That's right, this distributor controls the ignition completely electronically, and you can program it from your phone. But the beauty here is that with this built-in map sensor, this distributor can advance or retard timing, and it can actually read up to 23 pounds of boost. Now that's a ton more than we're ever gonna run. But this thing should drop right in place of our factory distributor and give us the ability to adjust timing for all this horsepower. One more thing I wanted to mention, all the gears on progression ignition distributors are melanized, so they are designed to work with factory flat tappet camshafts or late model or newer roller camshafts. So you should be able to drop this right into whatever engine you have and set your timing and go. All right, so we pulled the distributor out, and you might notice there's a little extra that came with. Whoops. So this is what I assume the oil pump drive shaft here, and it is stuck in this distributor. So we're gonna try to gently pull this out. Interesting. Hopefully that doesn't mean bad news.
All right, it's been a bit, and after what? Half hour?
Half hour.
Half an hour at least. We finally got this distributor to drop in there. We actually pulled the oil shaft out, as you guys saw before. However, we are pointed directly at the mark that we made on the intake manifold, right down there. Pointed right at it. We're very close, a little bit beforehand, so we should be right in time.
So what happens with the distributor is it ships to you and it has a solid 10-degree map in it. It's basically locked. And what we're gonna do now is go through the process of starting the truck up with the timing light hooked up and watching the balancer until we see 10 degrees. So we may have to adjust the distributor itself to hit 10 degrees perfectly, but as soon as we see that on the balancer, then we can go through the process of making a map, then we can get to the fun stuff. This is the first attempt to fire this thing with the turbo plumbed to the carburetor. Go ahead and crank it again. I think we got fuel in the front bowl. There you go. There we go. Okay, right there. I'm gonna mark the balancer with some white paint because I can't see a darn thing. Kevin, I'm not sure how you did this when we were in Iowa. Or were you just guessing? So go ahead and fire it up again. So inside the truck, I am now connected to my distributor. Next thing we are gonna do is generate a table. So this is gonna generate a timing table for us. By hitting that button, it's gonna ask a whole bunch of questions here. So in this case, number of cylinders is 8. Our idle speed, we're gonna set at like, what, 750 RPM, somewhere to start. Our idle timing, we're gonna do 15 degrees. Our max RPM based timing is gonna be 35 degrees. These are just numbers that we're gonna start with here. Now obviously later we're gonna change this with boost and stuff. So now you have an all-in RPM. And in this case, I'm gonna select 3,500. We're gonna set our maximum RPM at 6,000 RPM, okay? And then we're gonna generate the table. And now, if you look, I now have a basic timing table built for this truck.
Okay, here we go. First try on the new map. Nope. Fires right up, and look at this. You can see where we're at. Right there, you actually have live updates of where you're at in the timing map. Excellent. Man, is this cool. Look at this.
Wow.
12.5, so it's a little rich right now. We could probably lean that out. But our air fuel gauge is working, our boost gauge is working. Oh yeah. That fires right up. Runs just like it used to. It idles better now that that vacuum line that was hooked up to the modulator is fixed. Oh yeah, dude! Yeah, we're way lean, but that's okay. Yeah, we were wondering
spot. We're running out of fuel. I didn't think this thing was that low. No wonder it ran like crap. There ain't no gas in it. All right, first drive. Yeah, it went fine. We're currently, we're like a mile from the house, and it was running really bad. Turns out these things run a lot better with gas in the tank. Yep, that's right. I didn't realize that we were almost out of fuel. So guess who I called? S Motorsports. Is my neighbor. He's going to come rescue us with a gas can. So we don't have to push this thing a couple miles home. Oh, man. It was awesome until it ran out of fuel. Okay, apparently we've got a little bit more carburetor work to do. I think we also have a massive vacuum leak. I'm gonna check that transmission modulator, see if that line popped off again. But it runs and it drove, kind of. We have a lot of issues to work through. More tomorrow.
All right, after just a little bit more digging, I think I may have figured out part of our problem. Under the carburetor here, I think we had a few things hooked up to ported vacuum instead of full-time vacuum. So that may have been part of our problem with fuel pressure or whatever. So I'm going to readjust a couple of hoses under the carb there, get some stuff referenced to the right port. We'll try this again.
Back out here today. You guys saw in the last clip, I've been troubleshooting this thing. We did get it to drive around the block and then it ran out of gas, but it hasn't run right since then. Seems like the bulls keep running out of fuel. The first thing I want to try is I think this thing is pumping only when it's cranking. And then because we have the pump hooked up to a manifold vacuum source, I think that vacuum source is sucking the diaphragm of the pump up and not allowing it to pump. Thus, it runs out of fuel. So I'm going to try pulling the boost line off of the pump, plugging it, see if the truck starts and runs.
You can probably see, look at that front float bowl. Float is actually set high now. As of yesterday, I could not get that float to come up at all.
The front float bowl and the rear float bowl are now actually filling and staying full. The truck is idling and staying running. The problem was the vacuum from the engine was actually sucking the fuel pump diaphragm up and not allowing it to pump once it got started. I know. I made a mistake. I'm surprised by it too, honestly. The truth is I stopped reading the forum post that I'm referencing about one sentence too soon. The boost reference for your mechanical fuel pump needs to come before the carburetor. It cannot be plumbed to manifold vacuum. It has to come before the carburetor, either in the carburetor hat or in a boost tube.
In this case, I am going to drill and tap right into this port right here at the compressor outlet, which is a really popular spot to grab a boost reference. So just to recap, here's what's changed. We're now pulling boost directly from the compressor outlet. We go under and we tee off. We hit the blow-off valve as well as the fuel pump down there. The distributor itself and the boost gauge and the transmission modulator line, those all still go directly to full-time manifold vacuum because I want to know exactly what's happening and I want the distributor to react to what's in the intake, not what's in the pipe.
I'm going to take you guys back in the car and I'm going to show you what I did to modify the timing map and show you just how easy that is with this progression ignition distributor. Right before we drove the truck, I went through the process of setting up my own timing map, and progression ignition does a pretty darn good job of populating that map. The reason I use them, and the coolest freaking thing that they do, is they have a built-in map sensor, so we can adjust the timing for boost all in the distributor. We don't need an external box. I know I've said that before, but I'm really pumped about it. Let's see. Today over my lunch break at work, I went through the timing map that they generated, and I made some changes, and I'll show you exactly how you can do the same thing. So here is the Fundred base map, right there. And that is the map that was generated by the app itself based on the parameters that I put in there. So what I did, I took a screenshot of that map for my reference. If you start with a map like this, here's your base map. The very powerful part of this app is that this axis right here, the y-axis, can actually be rescaled. if you look at the very top section, if you click on that value, it gives you the ability to change that y-axis value, which is your manifold kPa. That's your manifold pressure. What I did is I went through and changed these values in the y-axis. I rescaled this table basically. The one part that you will have to do is to re-enter the values. So for example, I'll show you. If I set that value to 150 kPa, which is roughly 7.5 pounds of boost. If I set this to 150 and I hit apply, you'll now see in the upper right hand corner, that value is now 150. So the next thing that I would do, or that I did, is I took from 100 kPa down to, I think that says 20 kPa. I re-entered these values to be more evenly distributed, essentially rescaling the y-axis of this table. However, none of the timing values have been updated for these top 3 rows being changed to boost territory or above 100 kPa. So without getting too far into this, here's what I did. I referenced my screenshot map and I went back and I adjusted all of these rows to match the timing relative to the kPa to match the map that was generated by progression ignition. Where it says 100 kPa, I took that entire row and I made sure that all those timing values matched my 100 kPa timing row from the progression ignition map. And then the next row above that, I copied all of those values up and I did that the same thing for the 150 kPa. But here's where the boost retard comes in. The entire row of 125 kPa, if you select the cell on the far left and then the cell on the far right, you will highlight the entire column. And then you get some options. You can add or subtract to that value, or you can enter a value to set all of them the same. So what I did is, based on this being 3.5 pounds boost, is I hit the subtract button 3 times. And that essentially takes 3 degrees of timing out across that entire row. So the very top row, I took those values just like that, and then I subtracted, I think, 5 degrees. So now, if I hit apply, this timing map has now been adjusted to pull timing when we get into boost. And now if we open up our saved table, I have this Fundred boost rough adjustment table. This is the one that I've modified. See, it goes above 100 kPa all the way to 150, and I've rescaled this entire table. From the lower left corner, we hit the menu and we're going to hit send. Now that's sent to the distributor. Now you can see we're right here. We're at very low timing right now. I'm going to have to make some adjustments. If we select this 10, we up it a little more. We're going to send that to the ECU or to the distributor. There, now it's updated. We have a couple more degrees right there. So if we go back to our gauges, now we're idling at about 660 RPM, 15 degrees of timing, and we're at about 98 kPa, which actually seems kind of I think our map sensor is not reading right. That's better. Now our map sensor is reading about 15 inches of vacuum, which jives with what our boost gauge is saying. Got to make a few adjustments to the carburetor and then we're going to take her for a spin. All right. Idling pretty good, 700 RPM, 15 inches of vacuum, 16 degrees of timing, and 13.5-ish AFR. I know I still have some work to do on the idle, but let's drive it. Holy crap, man, it's doing it. Woo-hoo-hoo! It's been a second. I checked over everything under the hood. I was looking for any vacuum lines that blew off or any vacuum caps or anything like that. It doesn't look bad. We definitely have a float bowl that's way too high in the front, so I may pull that carb hat off and lower that just a little bit. But I think one more thing I'm going to do before we take this thing out for an actual drive is I'm going to temporary up some sort of exhaust, because as cool as it sounds, I don't think my neighbors are going to appreciate it. So how's about this for a 5-minute exhaust job? Right out of the downpipe, 3 inches straight back, and then a 45, and right under the bed. I got one hanger made of one of those rubber hangers, and a couple of bolts welded to the frame. It ain't pretty, but it should make this thing a little bit quieter until we get it dialed in. After welding up the world's quickest exhaust, we now have a no start. I can't imagine we don't have spark. Check and see if we have fuel. We got fuel. Do we no longer have spark? All right, go ahead. Okay. Must just be flooded to hell then, huh? We got spark. Okay, I'm gonna hook everything back up and we'll let her cool off and we'll try again in a little while. All right, so this is the first plug. Actually, this is what, 5 on Ford's. It's got a lot of oil around it from the valve cover leaking, but the actual electrode, I mean, it smells like fuel, but it's not like it's soaked in gas. Obviously running rich as shit as it was earlier. So I'm gonna pull the rest of the plugs and see what else is going on. All right, I ended up lowering the front float a little too much. Listen to this thing, huh? Not bad for a 45-second exhaust system. All right, we made it out the driveway and 600 feet down the road. And 100 gave up. Maybe I took a little too much fuel out of the idle. Woo-hoo! Oh man! Oh, it's actually doing it! This carburetor is not bad. It's rich, don't get me wrong. But holy cow, is it doing it? Like 5 pounds right there. Woo! Oh man, this thing is cool. Oh man. All right. Woohoo, man. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. We might need some new spark plugs and probably a little tighter gap. Woohoo! Oh! Whoa! Oh man! Oh, this thing is like terrifying to drive because it's still so loose in the front, but it moves, man. Wow. It seems like it's cutting out a little bit, and I'm not sure if that's because of the plugs or because of how much fuel we're putting into it. All right, we just did a little bit of a hit, starting in like first or second gear, and this thing hit almost 10 pounds of boost before I lifted. So for fear of it over boosting, I'm running around on the wastegate, and there must be a 10-pound spring in there. So I think what I'm gonna do, head back home and hook up a vacuum line directly to the wastegate so I can crack it open a little bit sooner. You can now see there's a fitting with a vacuum line that's plumbed into the same boost reference right from the turbo. So that wastegate now should open a lot earlier and limit our boost to at least half. We don't want this thing making 10 pounds right now. It's definitely not tuned ready for that. Okay, so here we are, undisclosed location, closed course. And this, I just want to say this might be the last thing this engine ever does. I don't know. Here we go for our first run, 0 to 60 post turbo. Here we go. Oh, couldn't stay in it the whole time. Okay. Rolling up to our undisclosed location once again. We're gonna try this again here to see what we get. First time I didn't stay in it the whole time. We saw some lean numbers, so I may have to pedal this a little bit, but here we go. Four, 0 to 60. So almost no better at all. We gained 0.16 seconds, but I have to stay at like, what, quarter to half throttle? Otherwise this thing leans out so bad it's insane. We will try again. Jeez. All right. Oh, this thing is running like absolute dog shit. Holy cow. Man, you can't stay in it. It needs plugs so bad. Oh man. It's so, it's like you give it gas, it starts to take off, and then it cuts out the ignition real hard, and you can't stay in it. And yeah, I feel like it's all over the place. Okay, our app is reset again. Try to get a little bit of torque. Here we go. Oh, wow. Oh. Did you see when I stabbed it, the cloud that shot out of this thing? I think maybe I've got an issue with my oiled return for the turbo. That's potential. It's definitely not running clean, that's for sure. Oh, look back there. See the cloud?
Yeah.
If you put it in drive and just stab it, I wonder what all the oil is from. Yeah, that didn't.
Oh.
We never made it to 60, I let off.
Okay.
Dang. Yeah. Needs some jets for sure. Well, folks, I think that might be it. Seems like the Fundred has just a little bit of excessive blow-by now. It is smoking like crazy. Holy cow. I'm gonna say that either we have a bad oil pressure or over-oiling problem with the turbo, or unfortunately the poor Fundred has given it up. Oh no. Oh my gosh. I think she might be done. What's happening, but now it seems like it's running fine. What the hell? I don't know. We might have another problem. Well, this might be the end of this engine. So if you look to your right, actually, I don't know if you can still see the cloud there. She just died again.
legs are just that bad. Alright, this is gonna be a little violent. Okay, I think we have found the limit on the boost for this FE. It was fun for about 10 minutes. It's like when it runs and drives, it drives completely normally. We'll take her back home and pull the plugs, see what happened to it. I don't think there's much left. As you can see, this FE doesn't like the turbo. We're going to try and see if we can do a better burnout than we did last time. Have it. Did it do anything at all?
No.
Oh, those are the tire marks from my other car that does burnouts. Oh, there it is. Put a turbo on your FE, drive it around, and it blows up. Rolls easy. Horn works. Just like on the road.
Poor Scott is barefoot.
Well, there you have it. I'm not quite sure what's going on. We drove the truck around for a little bit today and it actually seemed fine. And then it started to die and started to smoke and started to run really bad. However, we did find out after a little bit of tinkering that the front float bowl height had sunk or had gone all the way down to 0. With a little bit of adjustment, we were able to get it to fire back up and run, albeit smoking. I'm not sure if the Fundred engine is dead yet. The project definitely isn't dead. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been a hell of a lot of fun and a lot of work. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you in the next one.